Welcome back. It's week 3 and we've spent a lot of time talking about the fixed mindset tax. So time to move on to our next variable in our formula for effective coaching, the clarity of instructional vision. It's been a while since we've checked in on Mr. Good Coach. Let's go have a peek.
Okay, so Ms. McRookie, you're going to stand really still when you're giving directions. Remember that cutting down on body movement is going to up your clarity for your students, okay? And I want you to scan the room when you're giving instruction and narrate the positive. So when you see what you want, say it.
All right.
How you feeling?
Feeling great.
Okay, I'm going to be in my usual corner and we'll talk after class.
All right.
Great. Okay, I'll see you then.
All right, so let's pause right there. I need your eyes. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Cece. Great. So practicing how to integrate polynomials can be really tricky. So I'd like for you guys to take out your classwork and turn to page 4. We're going to do some independent practice on that. So Josh is there, so is Kevin, so is Angel.
Very nice. Looks like that relationship is still going really well between Mr. Good Coach and Miss McRookie. I mean, she clearly has growth mindset about her practice. They have a strong rapport, and almost looks like we're at that top circle of the snowman right now. Look how quickly she was able to implement the feedback that he gave her in that coaching session. It's all good. This really is good right now. And good, well, good ain't bad. But good is also not necessarily effective. Let's take another look at what you just saw. So it looks like Miss McRookie has implemented all of Mr. Good Coach's feedback. She was standing still when she gave directions, scanning the class, making eye contact to ensure students were listening to her. She was narrating the positive behaviors that she saw from the students. So looks like it's all good. Everything is there. Only I think there's something missing. So what is missing from this picture? Is it A, neater handwriting on the whiteboard, B, a lack of technology to leverage learning, C, Ms. McRookie forgot to post her learning objectives for the day, or D, are Ms. McRookie's students missing from the picture? You guessed it, it's D, the kids. We got so caught up in watching Ms. McRookie teacher's performance and looking at all of her new teacher moves that came from Mr. Good Coach's feedback that we forgot to ask a very fundamental question. In what way did her new teacher moves impact the students? Did it change their experience in any kind of meaningful way? Well, it might not come as a surprise to you, but students actually have a lot of expertise on great teaching. We recently read a very interesting research study that had a conclusion along these lines. It's called the Measures of Effective Teaching Project, and it was commissioned by the Gates Foundation. The MET project asked the question, how can we predict which teachers are going to be most effective? They wanted to know which teachers are best equipped to help students learn higher order thinking skills, and if those teachers are able to do that consistently from year to year. One of the core findings in this study is that in order to produce a reliably predictive model for determining teacher effectiveness, you must survey student opinions of how effective they think their teacher is. In other words, ask the students. They know good teaching when they see it. And that's a really powerful finding. It suggests that if you want to know how a teacher is doing, you can't just look at their moves. You have to actually somehow take into account what students are doing, students' opinions and actions. Which means that Mr. Keating, our favorite English teacher from Dead Poet Society, well, you can't just conclude from Robin Williams jumping up on the desk that his students are learning something. You actually have to turn the lens to look at the students themselves to find out the impact that their teacher is having on them. If you're a teacher coach, the tendency is probably to feel pretty good if you could just see a teacher implementing your feedback. You sit down, you coach them on skill X, you tell them to try out teacher move A, B, and C, you go in the next day, you see them doing it, that looks great. You pat yourself on your back, that's a good day at the office, right? Well, not necessarily. It could actually be the equivalent of feeling good about a lesson where students were highly engaged, but actually didn't learn anything. As a teacher coach, your job is not just to get the teacher to change their behavior, but actually to get them to make changes that have a real, noticeable, measurable impact on their students. Let's go back to our coaching formula. Now, by clarity of instructional vision, we don't just mean a vision of what the teacher is doing. Instead, we mean a clear vision of what students are doing, thinking, and saying in an optimal class period of learning. Of course, you as a coach need to make links for your teachers between their actions and efforts and how that's paying off for students, but ultimately you need a vision that is student-facing. Let's change our camera angle on Ms. McRookie's classroom for a second. Remember this?
All right, so let's pause right there. I need your eyes. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Cece. Great. So practicing how to integrate polynomials can be really tricky. So I'd like for you guys to take out your classwork and turn to page 4. We're going to do some independent practice on it.
Look pretty good, right?
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Cece. Great. So practicing how to integrate polynomials can be really tricky. So I'd like for you guys to take out your classwork and turn to page 4. We're going to do some independent practice on that so I can see if I did a good job at teaching you.
Maybe not as good as we thought. Now, there are lots of rubrics that define effective teaching, and we're not suggesting that you have to use ours, but you do need something. Your rubric is essentially the starting point for your relationship with your teacher. It defines the language that you're going to use in your coaching sessions for the year, and it will also add some urgency to those sessions. You have a finite amount of time that you get to spend with your teacher, and a rubric will help make sure that you use that time effectively. Finally, your rubric is like a syllabus. It constrains the relationship and defines the parameters of what you're going to talk about when you sit down in a coaching session with a teacher. We think it's quite common for teacher coaching sessions to turn into sort of a grab bag of topics related to teaching. Imagine you're coaching a teacher who just read Frary for the first time, and they show up at their teacher coaching session really excited to talk about the implications that work has on their emerging teaching philosophy. Well, that's a great conversation to have with a teacher, and probably a really important one, but also not necessarily what you want to make the subject of a coaching session. We think teacher coaching sessions should focus narrowly on skill acquisition, on developing the types of skills that a teacher needs to advance the instructional vision that you've laid out in your rubric. Remember the snowman effect? Well, if you're able to bring real urgency and focus to the time that you have in your teacher coaching sessions, we think you're ultimately going to shorten those skill acquisition loops. So clearly we're invested in this idea of having a student-facing rubric, and in the next video we're excited to walk you through ours. Before we do, one caveat. Our rubric is just intended to be used for analyzing classroom instruction to set up a teacher coaching session. By no means does it capture all the different parts of a teacher's job. Some of you out there might be administrators or principals who use lots of different sources of data to evaluate a teacher. For example, you might look at how they interact with colleagues or with parents, or the quality of the curriculum they create, their overall contributions to your school community. All of those things are really important to capture, but none of those are measured by our rubric. So click on over into the next video now, where we will release the Kraken.
Oren, that's another bad cliffhanger. It's not going to make it. They don't know your rubric's called the Kraken.
They do now.